What an interesting conversation that was. And it's an opportunity to brag, but also recognize that even if you're on the head of the curve, as Tony pointed out, you still have these kind of event horizon events that are going to challenge the best laid plans. And it's what makes life pretty great, knowing that it's not static. So our next panel is an exciting group who is going to have I think, amazing conversation about investment in capacity for future prosperity. And so want to welcome Jared Hagert, who is a North Dakota House of Representatives rep from District 20, which is just to the north of here, Hillsborough area. See, I still remember my districts. And then an old friend who I'm very excited to welcome to the panel, Lorraine Davis, who's the president and CEO of Native American Development Center. And finally on this panel is a dynamic leader that a great friend of ours, mine, introduced me to a number of years ago. And I was just so struck by and he had so much enthusiasm for that youthful investment of time and belief. And so that's Megan Langley, which is a name that some of us who served in the legislature, worked with the legislature, can remember pretty well. Her parents were, or her grandfather was a great civic leader. And so I'm going to start out with you, Representative Hagert, to make some opening comments for about 5 minutes. We'll go down the line. Lorraine, you'll be next. And then we'll open it up for questions. Again, panelists or commission members, please let me know when you have a question. So, Representative.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. If you look at your programs, you can see that I'm subbing in for Representative Jonathan Worry. I'm not as good looking, and I definitely do not have his step back left-handed jumper. But that's a hard shot to defend when you're playing against him. One of the things what I was asked to talk about is kind of the investment side in North Dakota. We have a sovereign wealth fund called the Legacy Fund, which we utilize. The legislature can allocate dollars from the earnings there. Earnings are determined by the 5-year average value, 7% of the 5-year average value of the Legacy Fund. And at the end of June, that clocked the ending balance for this cycle clocked in at $13 billion in the Legacy Fund. So as we moved this last session, we were able to allocate over $600 million in earnings for projects in the state of North Dakota. The major one is diversion around Fargo. So as you drive in, you see the Red River diversion that comes in. That's the bond payments are being made out of that earnings money. And one of the things that we did for citizens in North Dakota, property owners in North Dakota, this past legislative session was to offer up to a $1,600 primary residence tax credit on their property tax bill. So that was one part of the investment. Other parts, we have programs through BND with Legacy Infrastructure and Technology Fund. So that's stood up to allow companies that have the desire to take and leverage private or public funds to start a business in North Dakota to take and expand their capital base there. One of the examples that I can give you, well, I've got a couple of Grand Forks in prior District 20 examples. When I was first elected in the legislature, I did have Grand Sky in my district, actually 10 miles straight north of my farm. And it's been a pretty significant investment from the state of North Dakota. But we've got a public-private partnership going on there. So on 217 acres of United States Air Force land, we have developed, along with by utilizing a special use lease with Grand Forks County, Grand Sky is the business entity, the private entity that has started attracting commercial UAS sector jobs. So on the 217 acres, there's roughly 270 employees right now. Average salary is about $117,000. And it is the place where we have invested to run our Vantis network, so a beyond visual line of sight. So it's given us a real unique opportunity to get into a sector that normally wouldn't be in North Dakota, and prove the technology through the utilization of the test site and the Vantis network. I guess I'll stop there, I'll pause there, and I'm anxious to hear your questions.
Yeah. Lorraine? I think it's on.
It's on, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lorraine Davis. I'm the founder and CEO of the Native American Development Center based out of Bismarck, North Dakota. And I've been doing this work for 13 years now. So what the Native American Development Center is about is it's what you would call a Native Community Development Financial Institution. In short, it's called a Native CDFI. Just curious, how many have heard of Native CDFIs? Raise your hand. Okay, great. More than I thought. I always say it's the best kept secret. And it's actually a wonderful engine, I'll say, a pathway for those that are in distressed communities, those with low incomes. It really helps folks that are trying to start a business and or improve their credit, access capital. And so we do offer loans. Every Native CDFI and or CDFI that is non-Native, those are in our state here, like Lewis and Clark Development Group, for example, is a CDFI, a very good colleague of mine. And they're very different in what we offer in our loan funds. And so what we offer is micro business loans and credit builder loans and consumer loans. And then we also offer the financial literacy. What I say our goal is to help them access capital in the interim and help them improve credit scores and help us to go out of business. At some point, we hope that we're going out of business, because if we do, that means they're able to get into the mainstream FDIC regulated banks. Because they have high credit scores. So that just to give you an example of kind of the work that we do in our space, again, we do serve not just Native Americans, because we do get access to the Native CDFI fund, portion of the CDFI fund. We are able to provide 60% to Native Americans in loan capital. However, the other 40% can be anybody, regardless of race. It's more about low income and living in distressed communities. So I think it's a wonderful tool to be able to utilize in North Dakota, whether on or off the reservations. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be on the reservation. However, I would say that there are some Native CDFIs that are incorporated on the reservations. For example, I know Standing Rock has one called the Oyate Fund, and they are just serving their tribal members on their reservation. It is a best kept secret. I don't think it should be a secret. I really believe in it, and I could share more about some of the tactics that I've tried in bringing it to the state level.
Terrific. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Hey, Megan.
We'll just leave that in there for right now. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation representing capacity building, youth engagement, and workforce development. As was mentioned, my name is Megan Langley, and I'm the founder and executive director of Strengthen ND, a rural community and economic development organization that partners with small towns, nonprofits, and local leaders to build the North Dakota we all want to live in. I'm a farm and ranch kid who grew up about 10 miles outside of a town of 30. Today, I live on a farmstead outside of another town of about that same size. For me, the work of building capacity across the state isn't technical, it's personal. It's about legacy, about preserving the places we call home, and making sure the next generation can still find both purpose and possibility in rural North Dakota. At Strengthen ND, our capacity building philosophy is simple. We meet people where they are, geographically, attitudinally, and skill-wise. That means being present in their communities, listening first, and helping them build on what's already strong. I personally drive nearly 45,000 miles a year to be in community with people we serve, because capacity building can't be done from a distance. It takes showing up, sitting at kitchen tables, and working side by side with the folks who are doing the hard work of keeping rural places alive. When we talk about capacity building, I think of it less as training or technical assistance and more of an act of rebuilding trust. Trust in philanthropy, in institutions, and in one another. Through our work, we've been intentional about practicing trust-based philanthropy in rural places, listening first, simplifying access to funding, and building relationships that outlast any grant cycle. In the past 3 years, our team has helped direct more than $6 million into 38 locally led projects, everything from the expansion of a rural community land trust model to transformational Indigenous healthcare programs to laying the groundwork for mobile meat processing. But what we've learned through that process is this. Rural North Dakota doesn't just lack business capital, it lacks community capital. During our advocacy for Senate Bill 2097 in 2025, we found that 83% of North Dakota's cities, those communities with populations 1,000 or less, had very little, if not zero, direct access to or the capacity to access meaningful dollars for community improvement. Very few, if any, and I can't think of any, that had a full-time city auditor, a full-time grant writer. There were no locally owned financial tools, and that means that even good ideas like rehabbing daycares or rebuilding Main Street facades can't even get off the ground. SB 2097 proposed a $50 million state-seeded rural community endowment fund, a permanent source of flexible capital that rural towns could access to invest in themselves without having to compete with larger cities or changing political priorities. While we weren't successful in passing the bill, the need it revealed was undeniable. That effort laid the groundwork for what's coming next for us. In November, Strengthen ND will launch the silent phase of a capital campaign to build the Rural Futures Endowment, an independent, community-owned fund designed to meet both the capacity and capital needs of North Dakota's rural communities. The goal here isn't charity, it's self-determination. And we've seen what happens when a community gets that chance. In Cheyenne, North Dakota, a town of fewer than 200 people, our pilot community-owned financing tool with Cheyenne Grit was launched in 2022. Before that, the community hadn't received a major state, federal, or philanthropic investment since the 1970s. With that modest initial investment, Cheyenne Grit has already leveraged more than $800,000 in local reinvestment. The same principle drives our AmeriCorps program. We currently host 110 AmeriCorps positions across the state, with the vast majority in rural and remote communities. These members provide extra people power, helping local governments, nonprofits, and small organizations move projects forward that otherwise wouldn't happen. Whether it's running after-school programs, supporting food systems, or expanding local tourism, these members are helping communities imagine what's possible. And that connects directly to youth engagement and workforce development. If young people can't see hope, ownership, or opportunity where they live, they will leave, and we can't blame them for that. But when they see their community reinvesting in itself, when they can open a business, lead a project, or build a career right where they grow up, they stay. So when we talk about ensuring a vibrant rural future, it's not only about workforce pipelines or business recruitment. Rural capacity is built when people trust that they matter. Thank you.
Great introductory comments. Keith, you want to start with the first question?
Yes, I did. Thank you for those very interesting opening comments. All of you, in one way or another, in the business of resource allocation, different kinds of resources, but you all do that, and which means inevitably, I'm sure you get more people asking for those resources than you can cover. So what principles do you use to decide what it is that you're going to make those investments in?
Start at Megan's end.
Sure. It was mentioned on the last panel, this thought around local control and understanding the context of each individual community. So with our grant-making program, we invest in community-based problem-solving processes. So we really look at each individual community and what it might take to engage in creative community problem-solving within that community. What looks innovative or creative in my town of Souris is going to look very differently than in Cannonball or in Solon or in Devil's Lake or in Fargo. So it's having that local representation that not only decides where the money goes, but actually was a part of the front end of designing the entirety of the program, the guidelines, the criteria, the way in which we interact with people, that local representation of people who live in these communities deciding how money will be dispersed in terms of those programmatic guidelines, rather than just, well, let's get a rural representative on our advisory or on our grant making board so we can feel better about it or get some type of input. It's weaving that local control, that local context throughout the entirety of the process. That's how we go about it.
Lorraine?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you're running a business, you have to have business principles, and of course, being a loan fund, for us, we have to make sure that they have the ability to pay, first and foremost. But there's some folks that are not ready for a loan, for example, and so we don't we lay it down to them in a very casual way of just letting them know that we can't offer this to you right now at this time, but we want to work with you. And we want to help you to build your credit. And that's where the financial coaching component comes in. So I see it as a balance between running, hard business, it's always bottom line, but also with a relationship and helping to nurture folks, helping to develop folks so that they are ready when they're ready. But I don't think it's wise, for the system, I'll say, to be black and white, so to speak. So, it's either you have the credit score and you can get a loan or not. Where are those spaces within the systematic structure for those that are distressed, those that are trying to overcome their barriers and get out of poverty, or even middle income folks to be able to flourish and be successful, to run businesses, to buy homes, and so forth. It's like a black and white, so the poor will stay poor, and those that have intergenerational wealth will continue to do that. So that's my take. Thank you.
Representative?
As far as asset allocation within the state or dollar allocations, it's really isn't about credit scores. It's somewhat about ideas, but I know we've done a lot of grant work before, and one of the things we did this last session, and kind of how our mindset, or maybe not our mindset, but how we've evolved in the grant process. There was a company looking at 2 different states, North Dakota being one of them, to locate a $500 million potato processing facility that would add about 25,000 acres to North Dakota potato production of a different varietal than what is currently raised here, opening up a new market for wherever this plant landed. North Dakota, the site there happened to be in Grand Forks. The competing state was giving land away. The company would have to purchase the land here, but in order to make the best pitch we possibly could, we utilized a completion grant process where we allowed, we have a fund set up within the Department of Ag called the Ag Diversification and Development Fund. That was created in the 21 legislative session, and with the hopes that it would evolve into something like this. So the legislature said, all right, we will allow the Department of Ag to access a line of credit from the Bank of North Dakota in order to facilitate this completion grant. So the facility, once it's constructed, once they get their certificate of occupancy, it's a $30 million completion grant. But once their certificate of occupancy is achieved, they get to get half of that completion grant. They've showed that good faith, that they're here. They're not somewhere else. They're here. The other half comes in when they reach 50% of their production capacity. So we didn't want to just put money out there to put money out there. We wanted to invest with a purpose and say, we know you want to be here, but we want you to know that we're serious about having you, and we want your commitment. So they've broken ground in Grand Forks. It's going to be a tremendous boon not only to the state, but northeastern North Dakota. And looking forward, and it's their first U.S. plant. And I have to give a shout out to the Northland potato growers, because they actually did the legwork on this project and allowed the legislature to just kind of put the cherry on top with the completion grant. So when the legislature is looking at that allocation model, it's you know, hey, we need serious investment within the state. We want to continue the growth trajectory of the state, and we want to improve the products that we grow here. So when we do export those products, more value stays in North Dakota, and we can grow from that.
Keith, I want to mention too, because for the North Dakota initiatives here, folks who haven't been here before, we have the Bank of North Dakota, which is basically a development bank. It's the only state-owned bank in the country. And its whole mission is to help facilitate this. So on top of the things the representative has talked about, the Bank of North Dakota has been the backbone of investment, both in people, in student loans, in new farmers, I mean, just development programs as it comes up. A lot of that is low interest, and a lot of the Bank of North Dakota's work is a conduit from federal guarantees. And so it's a unique institution in North Dakota in terms of funding for development that a lot of people don't know about, but it's pretty amazing. Tony?
Thanks. I have two questions. One's just a direct question to Lorraine, because I know that you're also a part of the Mountain Plains CDFI Coalition, and so we're a beneficiary of a large federal grant from the Economic Development Administration. And since we're here thinking also about federal policy, it would be interesting to hear what's been positive about that. How's that been helpful to you? But also, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you would share with us? What suggestions would you have to make something like that better? And then both Megan and Lorraine, you talked about readiness. Megan, you continue to talk about capacity. It'd be great to hear a little bit more. What do you mean by capacity? We say capacity a lot, but what is that? Who are you working with? And what are you doing? Are those local governments? Are they local people? Are they local churches, nonprofits? And Lorraine, when you're talking about getting folks ready to be able to sort of take on that financial investment, what are you doing? Like, what does that entail?
Well, I'll answer that question first. Everything that we do, we have two nonprofits. So Native American Development Center is our commerce side of things, and the other nonprofit called Native Inc. is our socio-cultural kind of human services component of what we do. So the two-pronged approach is addressing poverty. And so the social-cultural side addresses trauma and the healing that needs to happen and kind of where we're at in today's time. And then the poverty side is the commerce side of what we do through the Native American Development Center. And I would say that our philosophy on both sides of the organizations is always about the relationship. Everything is about relationships. In Indian country, with tribal peoples, we are about tribal kinship specifically. And it's about our connection intertribally. When you think about urban Indian populations, when we're in Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, we unite intertribally and we feel as one, for example. So that's our connection and how we see each other. We are, everything is, we're familiar with our way of life and the way we interact with one another, and we feel comfortable and safe with one another. So I would say relationships is first and foremost is the approach I take.
And the question around what is capacity. So to me, capacity boils down to a few things: people power, money, and established institutions or systems. So at Strengthen ND, we were started in 2015 as a way to mitigate the disparities that we were seeing in not only traditional philanthropy, but also in state and federal funding, where there were so many rural communities that had these needs, that had great project ideas, but they just were not able to access the money in one way, shape, or form. So we started to support them to kind of game that system by serving as a de facto free grant writer for people across the state. And we saw that once they were equipped with somebody that knew how to write federal grants, and it is a skill, it's a talent, speaking to what the Fed, any department wants to see. You pick out the RFP, we all know how to, likely many of us in this room know how to do it. That skill is not very well known out in rural communities. We particularly have been focused on communities of 1,000 or less, to where it has been mentioned that very few of them have full-time staff, if any have any full-time staff. They likely don't have an EDC. They may have a county-based JDA, they may not. A lot of counties in North Dakota eliminated them, I want to say in the early 90s, when we were seeing great decline. It was just one more thing that they didn't want to invest in because they didn't see any hope in it. So when we think about everything that we need, and we'll just talk like federal grants, everything you need to successfully apply for a federal grant is really, really difficult for a rural community to be able to obtain. When you think about community readiness, has the needs assessment been done? Has the feasibility study been done? Have architecture and engineering work been done? Likely not. Well, some of that might be because there hasn't, all of that costs money. And a rural community may not have a lot of money. The town that I live outside of, we're dealing with a lot of these same issues where we've got a dilapidated former school. We have a church where the congregation just said, you know, we're not going to make it anymore. Here you go, city. Take care of it. And it's a huge church. And we've got $30,000 in the bank. How do you pay for an architect to come in and look to see if there's mold, to look to see what structural damage is there, to design a new building, to much less having to match money to secure a federal grant or a state grant? And then you have to think about what institution is there to take on that grant. It would likely have to be the city. Do they have the capacity with a 2-day-a-week city auditor to manage all of the federal regulations, to dot all of the I's and cross all of the T's? That's a really difficult thing to do. And then again, not to just compound on the money piece, that unrestricted money piece. We all know that many state and federal grants are reimbursement based. If you can't afford money for a needs assessment, a feasibility study, drawings, how are you going to be able to really engage or leverage money that you could get from slum and blight or brownfields and be able to keep your city running? So capacity for me boils down to those three things: people power, money, and available institutions or systems to capitalize on them.
I think, Lorraine, there was another question about the collaboration in your region.
To be quite honest, the Mountain Plains has not been too collaborative. So they did.
We won't tell anyone you said that.
Yeah. You know, I actually reached out to them recently. So in all fairness, they did reach out to me in the forming stages. And I just couldn't keep up with all the meetings, so I can't blame them for kind of backing out there. So I reestablished and reached out to them and said I'd like to get involved. I'd like to, you know, be a part of, you know, the movement in that, and because I do see the lack of Native CDFIs in North Dakota. And we do serve, you know, across the state for that purpose, because the need is there. There's a gap there for sure. So we are just now starting to partner on these initiatives. So with that, I'll say, you know, I think it's a positive thing. You know, they're at the federal level. They're united. It's a united voice. It's a coalition asking to, you know, keep Native CDFIs funded and telling the value, the story about why it's important to fund Native CDFIs. All of that's very important. I've always been a part of the Native CDFI network. It's a national body as well, so I still continue to be a member of that and go to the policy summit, not every year, but at least every other year. And so that has grown, that has become very savvy, and they're really gotten a lot of money through the Biden administration, and now, of course, now we're seeing some challenges with the current administration threatening to do the RIFs on all of the CDFI workers, and that can't happen. You know, I can't even express, I can't even say in words of how important CDFIs, not just Native CDFIs, but CDFIs are for all people. when you're talking about rural communities, when you're talking about, the low-income, distressed communities, it's vital. It's the voice for the people. And it has to stay. It has to stay. And so I do see myself as, getting more involved at the federal level. That is just right around the corner here for me. Been doing the state level for some time, and I wanted to share the opportunities that I'm always looking out for too. We know the problems, right? But let's not talk about a problem and then hear about it 10 years, 20 years later again. I try my hardest, as many of us do around this table, trying to solve problems. And one of the things that I approached this last session was partnering with the Bank of North Dakota as a native CDFI with creating a revolving loan fund. And because our Bank of North Dakota is the only state funded and we're a wealthy state, why can't we pilot that and just try that project out? We all know that loan officers are hard to come by. So there's a shortage in our workforce amongst everything, such as healthcare and teachers and so forth. So I see the value of piloting something like that right now, because I'll say it is hard to get a loan officer, because it's competitive. We're a nonprofit. We're not bank regulated. We're not FDIC ran. Those are all for profit. So we can't compete with what the commission they're paying and so forth. So it is scarce. So that partnership would be vital, because I would say we're an access point within urban areas, and that's been a strategy, because a lot of times I work in the housing world to the homeless and housing world, working on an affordable housing project for quite a few years, and land has been the obstacle there, but not giving up on that. But the homeless arena, they call people that are, this is in a HUD report in 2017, and they call us cyclers in the HUD report. In the Homeless Coalition, the terminology is we're called transient population. We're transient between reservations and urban areas. At any point in time, we could be in the urban area trying to get housing and so forth, and sometimes we just give up because there's not sufficient funding for rental assistance either. And so they go back home, and then you have, not enough housing, not enough quality housing, I'll say, and then not enough jobs. And so we're bouncing back and forth. And, we give up and we'll go back home because we have family, we could stay with relatives. But, these households are not, they can't hold two families in a house. So then they go back to the urban area, they try again. So I see that back and forth. I've been in the Bismarck community myself personally. I'm in the headquartered office. We have an office here in Fargo, and then we're opening up in Grand Forks within a month here. And what I see over the years, I see same people I've known that tried to get housing, and they might get it, but there's a lot of challenges with that. There's a lot of addiction yet. And then there's a lot of, alcohol's still a problem. And then the mental health issues. And a lot of times there's co-occurring disorders amongst that person or the people. And I think, we need to get better at understanding people. So when we're running business, we have to be in the middle. We can't be hardcore business owners. I like the social investors. Right? They're thinking about what are some good social outcomes. Yes, I want to invest in this business and I'm going to get a profit, but maybe I'm only getting, a percentage of the profit. They determine that. And then the other benefit is that there is a good social outcome that is becoming of it. So that's what I wanted to share. There's a lot of opportunity working with the Bank of North Dakota in doing a revolving loan fund. And I'll say the success that we weren't successful in that, by the way. And I do plan on bringing that back. I think we started too late in the ask. The Bank of North Dakota president did support it. However, he wasn't with me through the process. I think we started too late in the game. Mm-hmm. And because we did ask for money in addition to that. And I think the dollar amount was just too high. And so last session, not this past one, but in 2023 it would have been, we got our first time we got money from the state legislature, and it was for commerce. So that was $350,000, and it was for small business development programming to help me to kind of be more sustainable on our own. There's not enough philanthropy in our state. That's why you'll see a lot of us coming to the state for dollars, because there's not enough philanthropy in North Dakota. But also they funded the Tribal Economic Development Summit. We called it the Tribal Econ Summit. It turned out very well for the first one, but it was what I see being in, working. My husband was a state Indian Affairs Commissioner for 12 years, started in 2009, and I started the nonprofit in 2012. And so over the course of all of these years, I just see kind of still the same challenges till today yet. And one of the things I seen missing was a platform for tribal leaders and state leaders, federal government leaders, and all of these small business or corporations, banks, and so forth to come into one space so that they have an opportunity to network and talk about partnerships and get to know each other. Because I know that's the main spot. Anytime you're trying to be successful running it, whether it's a nonprofit business, for-profit, it's all about relationships. So that's kind of the opportunities that I see.
Thanks, Lorraine. Brent?
Thanks. I wanted to ask a probing and I think a little bit difficult question, which is to think about what it means to attempt to invest limited resources in very small communities. As one of our scholars who works on ag policy likes to remind me, the changes in rural population patterns and in rural economies means, well, especially on the economic side, a lot fewer people are needed to produce even more stuff than we ever dreamed of, right? In the past, in agriculture, we were massively more productive with 98% less people doing that work. So how do we make a decision about what's best and what's viable in terms of public policy and government investment? We can't save every community. It's not going to happen. And so what's the method or the approach or the way to talk about this? Because nobody wants to hear that their town is too small to save. But in reality, that's the fact, and we need to adjust our expectations accordingly. So I'm curious, how do you, as leaders, talk about this, or do you talk about it?
Sure, I'll jump in. Okay, this is not an unfamiliar question. We hear it often. You can't save every community, and that is a fact. You cannot. The way that we've approached it, and what I think people see when they go about moving it and working with these communities, is you can have a community that has everything going for it. Right? It's got good proximity to industry. It's got everything that we are often envious of, a grocery store or a community center or whatever that might be. But maybe the leadership or the desire isn't there. And it's something that we don't like to talk about, but it is real that there are some communities that have already accepted that we are just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until we're no longer viable. And that is okay. If the community is okay with that, it is not up to me, it is not up to anybody on this panel or anywhere else to tell them that that's not okay. But for the communities that still have that spunk or that spirit and say, you know what, like Cheyenne is a great example of this. At one time, there was an elementary school, a high school, a grocery store, a bank, a hairdresser, a couple of places to eat, and it was wonderful and vibrant. And that's when I was a kid. I graduated in 2005. So when I was, 13 years old, so let's say 1999, 2000, it was still pretty vibrant. Things went sideways, 2020, not a whole lot left there. A part of the school had burned down. The school closed in 2006, I believe. There was not a whole lot left there. But that community said, we know we probably won't get back to where we were, but we can work our butts off to figure out in what way we come back to that vision. So what you're seeing is they've recruited in 3 new businesses. They are doing all volunteer housing redevelopment. They've improved their housing stock 7%, and they're an agriculturally landlocked community. They have started what will be the first self-service, all locally sourced grocery store in the state. They are just doing it on all volunteer labor, all volunteer. But that is their choice because they had a community full of leaders, not just one leader, but full of leaders. And they have recruited people to come back and live in their community. And one thing that we have not talked about much, we've talked about capacity, we have not talked about much is youth engagement and how we still make people who grew up and maybe left our communities proud and still want to come back home. So what you're seeing is multi-generational investments because people care about the places that they live. So you're absolutely right. We cannot save every community. And that's where that boots on ground piece. And I know that's incredibly difficult with the federal government because it is, you've got to serve everybody. But that boots on ground piece to say, where are those high opportunity communities, those communities that, man, if they just had a little kick in the pants, they could do great things. Cheyenne Grit, for the initial community-owned financing tool investment, it was $150,000. We said, here's 150 grand, invest it where you think you'll get the biggest ROI, and at the end of 6 years, let's try to have $150,000 in that fund. And they doubled that fund in 3 years and did three housing flips and did all of that stuff. So the more you can have people within the federal government, those who are charged with grant making, the more you can get them out in the field and see these communities and see these people, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah. Can you ask that question? Who asked that question?
It was Brent.
Real brief again,
Yeah.
sorry.
So the question is, and having heard this response, I'll refine it a little bit. How do you make a decision about go, no go when it comes to investing in small towns? What are the it sounds like you're looking mainly at leadership, which I think is a really smart way to go. But are there other criteria that you use that are useful in assessing viability?
Thank you for that. Yes, that was a big question in how when I incorporated the nonprofits and you submit your articles of incorporation. What is my scope? And so thought long and hard before I went there and done that. And honestly, I chose to. So Native American Development Center is across statewide, but I know that we don't have the capacity to really serve. If we marketed the loans that we offer, we would not have the capacity to meet. I mean, the money would be all gone, right? It would go out the door too fast. There's not enough loan capital coming in. If we had enough loan capital coming in, then yes, we would market it and, we'd be meeting a lot of needs. So the thought that I had going in was, capacity. So we could do more, like Native Inc. Has a little bit more of a revenue generation stream. So we're able to have offices in different spaces, different cities and that. And I focused on urban areas. Why? Because tribal government, it's they have their own approaches to things, and I didn't want to feel like I'm stepping on toes. I didn't want to look or appear as stepping on any toes, and so I focused on the urban areas. One of my leaders is a leadership. It was a leadership, not a camp, but an academy, so to speak. It was a Native Nations leaders group, and they're still going today. I think they're up to like cohort 16. I was in cohort 3, and back then I was trying to determine. I didn't incorporate any of the nonprofits yet or anything. I was working at for I think IHS hospital at that time, and I was trying to see where I wanted to go. How do I want to help And of course, a lot of us, as Indigenous people, we want to help our people, right? That's just kind of our worldviews and how we see it, because there's a lot of need to help in those areas. And how did I want to do that? And one of my leaders within the leadership group had said, do you want to come from it from the outside, or do you want to go through the inside? And what he meant by that was, do you want to go through tribal government and be a leader within tribal government, or do you want to come through the outside? And I chose the outside because my family, we made a home in the urban area. I can't just go back home. I have, oh my goodness, so much I get torn to go back home in Sisseton, Wahpeton Sioux Tribe, which is just an hour south of Fargo here, all the time. It's really hard to leave sometimes, and I ready to build a home there, a second home, because I'm trying to be in two places and trying to help over there too. That's just who we are as tribal people. We always care about our homelands. And I think that's the similarity as rural, right? If we're living in an urban area, our homeland is still at our farmland where we grew up for generations and that. So a lot of similarities there, but I would say the interdependence is the approach. We talked about that, I think, at the last panel. Interdependence is very much the approach I saw as complementing the work of the tribes, helping tribal people. And we do that by being a continuum of care with the tribes. So the jurisdictions are different, but being in the urban area, it's kind of a catch-32 where we could have a contract with the tribes to serve tribal members. Like right now, we currently have tribal resolutions of support by all the 5 tribes of North Dakota to serve their tribal members living in urban areas of North Dakota. And I've expanded to South Dakota, Sioux Falls specifically. That's our next step of where we're going. But interdependence is very much the approach, complementing each other's work. Thank you.
Representative.
Geez, you're not looking to get a legislator in trouble, are you?
That was the idea.
No, nobody wants to have those conversations because they are tough, very, very, very tough conversations. And one of the debates that we have in the legislature is around public schools, and school funding. How do we better educate the future North Dakotans? To go back a little bit, in the 90s, late 80s through the 90s, we did a hell of a job exporting our most precious resource, and that was young North Dakotans. They're starting to come back, and right now we have a vibrant North Dakota, I believe, with young people engaged at their local community levels. Earlier unfunded mandates were talked about. They always happen, intentionally or not. One of the unfunded mandates that we've had in North Dakota has been the regional development councils. This past session, we actually invested the first state dollars into the regional councils to help with the grant writing process. So we're hoping to see a return on that investment as we move forward, albeit in the next couple of years. But it is really tough because in the rural areas, any small town, once a school closes, that's the death of a small town. And no, they can't all be saved. And just taking and I'll really get myself in trouble here. A good thing I'm in District 22, but when I went to K through 8 in Emerado and ended up going to high school in Northwood. I could have gone to Larimore, but I figured my brothers and my father and my family, they'd already caused enough trouble there. Well, we'll go to a different town. But so in the mid-2000s, a tornado went through Northwood, destroyed the local school, and it's really tough to say this, but in rural North Dakota and small towns everywhere, everybody's got to have their own school. That would have been the perfect opportunity to create the community involvement needed in 3 separate communities to co-locate a school for the future. We missed that opportunity. We built a brand new school. Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. But guess what? The community to the north and west of us just refurbished their school. And the community to the south and east of us just did the same thing. Now, is that really the investment we need in rural North Dakota, in rural America? I think we need to be smart about the placement of, when we approach these things, it's really hard to take a step back and have a 30,000 foot view, because I think we miss opportunities by not doing that. You know, in North Dakota's state motto is strength from the soil. And what we've done in the legislature is we've tried to drive it and live up to that strength recently with our focus on value-added ag. I mean, you don't have to look, you just have to look across the interstate. You look at the $500 million invested in a soybean crush facility that wasn't there. You've got a corn ethanol facility. I think that was north of $500 million. We've got another $500 million investment from another soybean crush facility just 60 miles down the road. It's incredible. We didn't have those things 10 years ago. It's something that we've tried to attract, and I never thought I'd say it, but thank God for California and the renewable fuels mandate that they have. Renewable diesel, that's what's driving crush operations in North Dakota. One of the things that was mentioned earlier, and I'll be brief on it, but is workforce. You know, in 2023, we don't have enough North Dakotans here to service our workforce needs. So we stood up the Office of Legal Immigration, and I think you'll appreciate this, which helps North Dakota businesses legally employ new Americans. You can't have your Oli without your Lena in North Dakota. But evidently that office, it did a really good job, but must have been a car enthusiast got a hold of it, because now it's the Global Talent Office, so we got a GTO instead of an Oli, which is a little disappointing for a Norwegian like me.
I think it's so interesting. One thing we haven't talked about, because we've spent a lot of time talking about federal programs and talking about, you know, state programs, amazing, robust opportunities in North Dakota. But I do want to mention one other kind of very generous North Dakota program, and that is to try and get more philanthropic dollars into communities. So if you are, you know, I think the limit is $5,000, you get a 40% tax credit if you invest, but it has to be an endowment kind of funding situation.
Minimum of 5, max of 10.
Right, but your credit is 40% of whatever you put in. And so many of these communities that Megan's talking about, who are dynamic with a lot of leadership, have partnered up with larger organizations, because they don't have the capacity to build out a community development fund that would qualify for the state funds. So they've built capacity, and they've gone back to alumni. People who still care about their hometown aren't going to move back there, but have been able to raise a lot of money philanthropically with this tax credit and even beyond that. And so one thing we haven't talked about, Tony and Brett and Commission, is those philanthropic dollars that could be huge. And what we see in North Dakota is places where very wealthy North Dakotans have gone to Class B schools, and then regardless of whether it makes sense, they've put, you know, millions of dollars building a new gym or whatever it is, because they have pride still in where they came from. And you know, I think there's tough choices in rural America, as we talked about this morning, tough choices in terms of when do you say enough? That is just, now we've reached the tipping point and there's no coming back. And I think Megan said it best, when people say we're done.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, because I think it's a really important point, I think that these kinds of decisions are best kept out of government, actually, which is what I appreciate about Megan's project. The decision to go or to stay or to shutter things and move on, that needs to be made by the actual people who are affected by the decision, not by some arbitrary standard, because government would be happy to set a standard, you know, no more federal dollars for towns of less than 100. You know, you could do that, but how incredibly cruel and heartless. And it really, using philanthropic dollars to do those, to help communities make their own assessments of where they are and what they think their future is, I think is really the key to this.
And I think tomorrow what we're going to see is Minnesota has a very robust kind of regional philanthropic outreach program. And so you're going to hear a different story. It's much less organized in North Dakota than it is in Minnesota. Minnesota's been ahead of the curve. Ella?
Just a quick follow-up on that point. Something that I think is interesting, particularly for the commission and the critical value of hearing from local rural communities as we think about recommendations on a national level, is the relationship really between lessons and local lessons that can be applied more broadly. And the takeaway for me about that example is, yes, agree that philanthropy plays a really catalytic role, but it's the government, it's the public-private piece of it which really incentivizes philanthropy and the local communities to go seek it out, to bring it in, and for the economic benefit that comes with it. So it's that partnership. So you get a tax benefit for making the contribution, and the local communities actually need to create partnership that draws those dollars in.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, because I've done a number of these things to organizations in my capacity, is I say, I get to be a mini appropriator.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? I mean, you've given me now the power to decide where $4,000 or $5,000 of, well, it's $4, right? The maximum you can take is $4, but $4,000 of state money goes. And that's a pretty generous opportunity if you were planning on doing philanthropy anyway. And these organizations, I mean, it used to be capped and now they've opened it up again. And I think it's a model that we should be talking about, the philanthropic model that we haven't really hit on today because we've been doing a lot of talk about the government, but how do we incentivize, which to your point, this is not a solo act. This is an act of generosity that I get to be a mini appropriator for.
Right. I mean, the other piece of it, sorry, just one other point, Megan, but I'd love to hear from you, is that from a philanthropy perspective, which is something that I spend my career focusing on, there are very few solutions that, or philanthropists it's very rare that a philanthropist will look at a solution and say, oh, I want to pay for that in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. It's generally, you think, oh, this is an interesting solution. We'll put some dollars towards it to see how it actually grows or how we can catalyze change. And so the opportunity to actually partner in one way or another with government dollars, and obviously it starts with local community, that's the place where new ideas can be seeded, where you can get a little bit of a boost, where you can think about where other dollars can come from, or it's a bridge to something else. But it's not philanthropy. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions, is never the end-all be-all solution, but a partnership actually enables innovation to come out of it, to be born out of it.
I promise I'll be super quick. I appreciate that the notion or the recognition of it's got to be an all-in approach. We all have to care. When communities don't have sufficient tax base in order to maintain their essential infrastructure, it impacts everybody. I don't know how many times I see a community say we're on a boil order, or we're not going to plow our streets because it's helping to insulate the pipes. We all have to care. If we don't, rural places like North Dakota, particularly rural places, may then be on the precipice of a public health crisis. When you have contaminated water, when you can't drive a reasonable distance to get your groceries, when you can't drive a reasonable distance to access healthcare, or somebody can't get to you in an emergency where we have these blackout zones of not enough emergency services personnel or volunteers. We all have to care. And I know private philanthropy does not necessarily look favorably on infrastructure. Like, nobody wants the John and Judy Smith lagoon. But the fact of the matter is, investment in a lagoon is holding back a community from being able to build more houses, which could then improve their school district to make it more viable, which could then improve their grocery store. They have people that want to move there. They literally cannot build any more homes because they don't have the infrastructure to support it. So it's going to take everybody, state government, federal government, private philanthropy, big philanthropy, small philanthropy, in order to support rural communities to be exactly what Brent was talking about, to either survive, thrive, or quietly go away. It's not up to any of us to decide, but if people want to keep pushing forward, it's our responsibility to help them.
Tony, yeah, we're ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, we're at time.
Okay,
We're over
sorry,
time.
I'm sure we'll have a lot of time to kind of continue this conversation among the committee. I want to thank everybody who came out. I hope this has been enlightening to you. We're very excited about this project. Follow us. What, you want to give them the website?
America's Rural Future, just search on Brookings America's Rural Future, Brookings AEI, and you will find our website. You can
Yeah,
continue to stay up to date. We'll have videos, we'll have summaries, we'll have continued policy briefs off of the work that we're doing.
And hopefully an ability for all of you to communicate back to us, because I know there's people out there probably biting their tongue, wishing they could jump up and have a conversation with us. But I mainly want to thank Grand Farms and Greg, and there's Greg back there, and Matt, and the whole team, the board, the Grand Farms board that's here for their incredible hospitality. Can we give them a round of applause? And I want to thank our amazing panelists who took time to participate in this process. This is the first one, on my insistence, that we come to North Dakota. But I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned about what we do in North Dakota and how we've been able to kind of navigate some of that area and encourage investment. And so, but I think Megan is a stark, I heard Megan and Lorraine are stark reminders that there's a lot of North Dakota that's being left behind, and a lot of our rural places that are being left behind. So as we are working to pat ourselves on the back pretty strenuously, we should also remember that we should all care. Thank you, Megan, for that. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to close the hearing.